I'm your daddy now.
Disney Plus has officially announced that their new Percy Jackson TV series is in the casting process. Their new series coming soon. With this news, a retrospective of the original Percy Jackson film is in order. Is it really as bad as people say? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I grew up loving the Percy Jackson books, yet the older I got, the more I found myself souring on the story, books and movies. But as a kid, these books were the pinnacle of storytelling. First of all, how does this fucking movie even exist? With such an insane cast and the talent of the director of the first two Harry Potter films, Chris Columbus, this film should have been knocked out of the park. I mean, Uma Thurman as Medusa and Sean Bean as Zeus? How was that even possible? Even with all that potential, the film fell flat for most of the audience. As someone who loved Greek mythology from an early age, of course I was drawn to the Percy Jackson books, loving them until I was exposed to better young adult fantasy series, and until I grew up enough to realize that they do a very poor job of adapting the myths from which they are derived. Now, I see so many fundamental flaws in the books and in the world which those stories inhabit. Even as a kids' movie, this film must endure scrutiny from an analytical mind and stand on its own. Being for children or loved by children is not a defense for poor quality. I don't think that Greek mythology can be accurately adapted into children's content. It's far too dark, violent, and sexual to be properly translated to children. Even the books spend half their runtime dancing around concepts like incest, rape, and murder, while not satisfyingly patching up the narrative gaps those omissions incur. That is particularly why I believe any Percy Jackson film or TV show is destined to underwhelm audiences as 2010's Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief did. From shallow characters to a nonsensical plot and a total misunderstanding of Greek mythology, this film was doomed to fail from its first draft. It's a tragedy that it's not any better, and for far more reasons than just the story itself. With the exception of Christian influences, Greek mythology defines our modern world far more than any other culture. From advertising and marketing campaigns, to brands and products, and to our architecture and political systems, so much of our current world owes tribute to those enchanting tales from so long ago. Despite all that influence, very few creative endeavors exist in homage to that debt we owe the ancients. Besides Percy Jackson and Clash of the Titans, no other major films, TV shows, or books even attempt to bring prominence back to these incredible stories, ideas, and myths. The greater crime beyond that misstep is that these two franchises do a very poor job at accurately portraying the culture and ideals that they derive inspiration from. The Greek world is so vibrant and brimming with opportunities for creative adaptation. The possibilities are near endless, yet writers and filmmakers avoid these stories with a strange aversion. Until that changes, Percy Jackson is the best we have, little enough as it is. And spoilers ahead for a 12-year-old movie. Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief was released in theaters in 2010 to an underwhelming reception. Sure, it made money, but the fans' responses were divided at best. Many who went into it wanting to love this film, leaving disappointed. The film follows Percy, an ordinary kid struggling with ADHD and dyslexia, who learns that he is the son of Poseidon and destined for greater things on account of his birth. The Greek gods, who he now knows are real, believe that Percy stole the lightning bolt, the symbol of Zeus's power. Zeus plans to start a war with Poseidon if the bolt is not returned at the appointed hour. Percy, with the help of his friends Grover and Annabeth, must quest across the country to the underworld in search of a way to prevent the war. In the end, it is revealed that Luke, a fellow demigod, stole the bolt and framed Percy for the theft to incite war against the gods. Percy manages to defeat Luke and return the bolt to Olympus in time to prevent the war and save the world. A simple enough story concealing empty characters, lackluster motivations, and middling world building. Some of the broader world building issues are the fault of the books and not the film itself, though they still bear mentioning here. If the gods are in power, why are they hiding, no longer influencing humanity like they used to? How does humanity not know better? Humans see plenty of impossible things throughout the movie, yet no one cares. At least the books had plot-convenient bullshit about mist that covers magic and makes it seem ordinary, but this film ignores that concept, allowing the world to just be full of idiots instead. Even with the mist, why do Greek myths exist in the first place if humanity couldn't see through the mist in ancient times either? The film could have benefited from a story-related reason for the gods slipping into myths. As it stands, the ego of these gods would never have allowed humanity to forget about them. The very world the film exists in doesn't make sense, so how can the story work in that sort of world?
It's like high school without the musical. Every day is the same thing. Look at this.
When it comes to the dialogue, it was all so cringy, especially the jokes. Everything was cheesy or over the top. All the moments of gravitas or seriousness were immediately undercut with a stupid joke, destroying the tension of the scene. A more and more common trope in Hollywood. As for exposition, there was so much of it, which is understandable for such a large world and so much needed information, but it was all delivered so poorly with little prompting, most characters forgetting about relevant information until it was too late. Like Annabeth knowing the stories of the Lotus Eaters well, but not putting the word lotus with the flower food together to realize where they were until they got out of the casino. The combat in this film was atrocious. I mean, what is this move that Annabelle makes here? No, she's dead! Shadiversity would have an aneurysm watching this movie, and not just from the fighting, but also from the nonsensical training arena. It's all right on top of each other. These archers are shooting across the walkway at their fucking horses! All just for a couple cheap jokes. No, the horses are all dead, and the infirmary is full of arrow-ridden people. No one is safe here. This makes Hogwarts look like a kiddie daycare comparatively. There's more nonsense like this throughout the film. Luke's plan is horrific and based solely in coincidence and luck. At least the books had Kronos behind the scenes being smart and trying to weaken Olympus so he could attack. Some more minor issues. Medusa can sense demigods, but only after they talk. The truck plan is just as likely to kill Percy as anyone else. How does everyone, except of course Hades, somehow expect Percy wherever he goes, despite no one knowing his plan or following him? Percy wakes up Grover and Annabeth from the Lotus spell in like 2 seconds. Why would Chiron put a junior protector on a child of the Big Three, one of the most powerful people in the world? It's clearly summer because no one's freezing to death in those open-air tents in New York, so why is Persephone in the underworld at all? She's only supposed to be there into the winter, which causes the seasons. How does no one think 3 pearls, 4 people, that might not work? Why the fuck are there a bunch of random water tanks on the top of a New York skyscraper? Is that a thing? How does Percy's mom know the route to Olympus? Oh, this place that I've never been to and am not even allowed to enter? I totally know how to get in. It would have made more sense for Annabeth to know, because at least in the book she'd been on a field trip to Olympus before. One of my biggest problems with the film comes from my academic side, not my film enthusiast side. The film's depiction of the underworld is wholly inaccurate. The underworld is the equivalent of heaven and hell. There are good parts and bad parts. Elysium and the Isle of the Blessed are beautiful paradises designed to reward the worthy and the righteous, while the fields of Asphodel are a middle ground between paradise and torment. Just sort of meh. It's one of the only examples of a middle ground in the afterlife for the okay people. Then, there are the fields of punishment, where the vile and evil are tormented for all eternity. The underworld is not just the fields of punishment, and Hades does not relish in his position. He is not evil. He manages both the light and the dark of the underworld. He is only perceived as a villain by those who are afraid of death. He is no more evil than the other gods or the Christian god who also manages an afterlife. We need a Greek adaptation that explores the complexities of his position and his domain, rather than constantly painting him in a bad light, debasing the vibrant and diverse underworld into the Christian hell. To ensure a fair review, let's take a look at what the audience members reviewed this film as, to see if I'm alone in my thoughts. Now, does that really surprise anyone? 49% from critics and 53% from audiences. I'm not surprised myself. It definitely seems to be the consensus of both fans and critics, just in my personal life, that this is not a great film. But let's take a look at a few of these to see how in-depth these reviews go. Pretty much what the shared consensus was. Nice to see Pierce Brosnan as wise old centaur. He was actually one of the best parts for me. He seemed to be having a lot of fun. As someone who enjoyed Greek mythology, I like this movie much more than I would have expected. Based on the book series, this sees teenager Percy discovering he's the son of a god and must embark. Okay, so it's just describing what the movie's about. Yeah, and so a lot of people did have a problem with him being as old as he was, because in the books he started out as being 12, and there was a big prophecy about him turning 16, but I mean, he's 18, 17 in the movie, so that's not going to work. When I went to check the reviews for this movie, I was shocked to see how many people have liked it. When I first watched this movie, I enjoyed it too, but a year or two later, I started reading the book, so I wanted to see how accurate the movie was. And oh my god, this is the most inaccurate movie ever. Yeah, a lot of people prefer the books, and I can't blame them. I definitely soured on them the older I get, but as a kid, the books were definitely the superior of the two. Pretty average movie. That's an attempt to get another Harry Potter-esque franchise going. Yeah, a lot of people make that comparison, and it's a very fair one. I can't remember when the first Percy Jackson book came out, but it definitely shares enough similarities that an argument can be made. Ignoring how terrible it strayed from the books, this movie was disappointing. It was filled with plot holes, the character had no personalities, and the twist at the end incited no emotions. It passed the time, but only because I laughed at it and mocked it. Yeah, the people who enjoy it usually are just like, this is a terrible movie, and it becomes comedic at that point. But there's a lot more 1 stars than I expected. I was expecting more like 3 stars from the overall consensus, but let's take a look at the critics, see if they're any different. Now, these are always a lot shorter than the audiences, so let's see if we can derive what they're thinking. For every creative aspect, there is a contrived and rather nonsensical counter that unfortunately tips the movie more towards derivative than innovative. I actually agree with that. That's really well put together. There's nothing resembling a spark in this film anyway. Okay, but only just. The Lightning Thief is an admirable kid's fantasy, and I don't know if this is what the person was implying, but it reminded me of an argument. Is a lot of people, when it comes to kids' movies, are like, you can't analyze a kids movie. It's made for kids, so it doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it's smart, and that's not an argument. Plenty of kids movies have been intelligently made and incredibly put together, like Pixar in the early 2000s. They were dishing out beautifully written films over and over again, and it's kind of disingenuous and really insulting to the youth of our society to say, oh, they're just too dumb to understand this movie, so it doesn't matter if it makes sense. No, it still matters, and there's still an argument to be made of quality when it comes to these sorts of films and TV shows. The plot uses the presence of Greek gods as an indistinct outline to influence teenagers who are more interested in the prestige and glamour of their connection than the responsibility that comes with it. It's an interesting perspective to take, not one I've heard, really, and that argument definitely applies to the books as well. It kind of just builds up to a lot of not much. That's very... I agree with that. But it seems like they're more positive in general than the audience were. I'm wondering whether score was lower. Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes, I don't trust. I don't trust the overall scores, but I like to read the actual reviews from people to get an idea, and their entire algorithm or whatever that they use to derive this scores from don't really make any sense to most people. So I did want to mention that, yes, this movie did make money. It had a budget of $95 million, which, with how big the cast was and how impressive the cast was, that sort of makes sense. That makes sense. It seems like too much for like the visual effects and whatnot, but the cast they needed to pay that much to have that many people in it, and it still managed to make $226 million. So that's more than double. So even with marketing put in, they made enough money to make a sequel. But when fans just don't like it, it becomes a problem. That's why they haven't made a third one. Just because you make money doesn't mean you're good or that people will like it going into the future. And that's something that Hollywood doesn't really understand anymore. They seem to think, oh, it made money. We need to keep doing this over and over again until it stops. It's like, you got to listen to the fans as well. But, not anything I wasn't expecting to come out of this section. I know it sounds like I hate this film outright, but there were some things that I genuinely liked. There was some dumb fun that I laughed at, but those moments were few and far between.
But, welcome to the modern world.
Cool. New stuff.
Luke was the highlight of the film for me. Even though his plan made no sense and he was given terrible dialogue, Jake Abel still managed to create a compelling performance. The broader issues with his writing still kept him from being a great character, but there were some enjoyable scenes that made you connect with him more than the other paper cutouts in the film.
I definitely have strong feelings for you. I just haven't decided if they're positive or negative yet.
Annabeth was so empty and pointless to this story. She had no character or arc, and the actress playing her delivered a rather flat performance that made it difficult to even like her, let alone relate to her. She's been great in other stuff, but she was just too young in this film and hadn't gotten her feet under herself as an actor yet.
Whoa, whoa! You're half donkey?
I'm half goat.
Grover was also an empty character. He had no arc or consistent personality. He was solely there as comic relief. He served no other purpose. Which is sad, because they had the beginnings of an arc for him. He could have been struggling to overcome his self-consciousness as a junior protector set to protect the most important person in the world. His growing confidence drawing the audience into field for his struggle. That could have been interesting.
Silence!
The rest of the supporting cast either had no talent or was indifferent and disinterested in putting in the work. Sean Bean's Zeus should have been the most exciting thing about this film, but he clearly did not give a fuck, phoning in his entire performance. Throughout the film, he was depicted as vain and stubborn, not listening to anyone, but he suddenly believes Percy at the end, the guy holding the fucking bolt, when he says, "Nah, it wasn't me, it was the other guy." The Zeus we saw prior to that would not have believed him. He had no proof or reliable witnesses. No one else had a character or even tried, except for Pierce Bronson. He was perfect casting and did wonderful despite the terrible script. Him and Uma Thurman were clearly there just to have a lot of fun. Both were small bright spots in an otherwise empty film. Percy's mom was fine, not really making an impact on the film. The big thing is, they still had her murder Gabe like she did in the books, though through a different method. That's a bit much for a hero's mom who we're supposed to like and think is just a sweet, innocent person.
How did you get up there? Whoa, whoa!
You stole the lightning bolt!
I don't know what you're talking about!
Give it to me!
Logan Lerman is a good actor who I've liked in other performances, but like the Annabeth actor, he really hadn't got his feet under himself as an actor yet. Percy was the only character with an arc, little enough as it was. He was too good at everything, too perfect immediately. He had a single day of training and adjusting to this new world before he was ready to take on a quest and fight monsters. Just add a little water and he's unstoppable. He even beats Annabeth, the best fighter in the camp, on his first day with a Pokemon-style power-up. There's not much struggle for him throughout the story. He's just going from one place to another, easily dominating everything wherever he goes, which is diametrically opposed to the shy, awkward kid that he was at the beginning. Without a strong lead with a compelling story, this film never had a chance. In the end, it's sad that we've never got a better Greek adaptation. This film really isn't worth watching, just mediocre at the very best. And I have no hope that Disney Plus will do any better adapting this rather average story. But we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.